Hi, I'm Adam in Wales and this is my board gaming vlog, and this is the second vlog I've made in 2 days. And the reason for that is because I thought I would make a follow-on, an addendum to my previous vlog in response to a comment from Benji Tham on YouTube, who asked me about where does bluffing fit into my 10 degrees of player interaction that I talked about in my vlog yesterday. And I thought it was a good question and worth discussing. So what I did in that vlog yesterday was separated out interaction from essentially the games which have player pieces interacting with each other and game mechanics that interact with each other from the games where players interact with each other in a sort of more social way. So in a game like chess, that is deeply interactive in terms of the player pieces moving, attacking, what one player does directly affects the other. But in terms of social interaction, there's very, very little. It's often played in total silence and concentration. Once we get into the second half of my list of 10 degrees of social interaction and we start to look at negotiation games and auction games and social deduction games and party games, these games become much more about personality and social interaction. And that's where bluffing and lying can come into these games. Now you'll notice there I make a distinction between bluffing and lying. Although the two things are very close to being synonyms, within common gaming parlance there's a subtle difference in connotation between the two. And in fact I would say that lying is a subset of bluffing. You can bluff in many ways and lying is just one of them. Lying meaning saying something that is overtly, blatantly not true. Outright saying it, speaking it, where bluffing can mean implying it through various different actions, trying to lead people down the wrong path. But if they go down that path, that's on them. They've made that judgment from my actions. I didn't say that that was what I was doing. And I think that's the common distinction that people make when they use those two terms, lying and bluffing. And so there are games that feature one of those things, lying, and there are games that feature bluffing. In fact, I think Spyfall, that I talked about in the video yesterday, is a really interesting example, as this is the only social deduction game that I can think of that doesn't feature outright lying. It features bluffing. The players are sort of trying to blindside their opponents through the questions that they ask. They're not outright lying. They're making statements that might lead somebody down the wrong path, and that's unique amongst the other social deduction games, aside from, I suppose, the genre that Spyfall has created, which are now coming through, and we're starting to see a lot of those appearing at Essen this year, and things like Fake Artists in New York, things that were essentially a development of this Spyfall idea. Let's take a look at the game Sheriff of Nottingham. In Sheriff of Nottingham, players take turns playing as the sheriff. Each other player selects cards from the deck and tries to maneuver sets of cards from their hands into their scoring piles. Easy enough to do when they're low-scoring apples or chickens, but more difficult to go unnoticed if the card's an illegal item or contraband. Players place their cards into a small pouch and declare its contents either truthfully or falsely to the sheriff. The sheriff in turn can let their pouch go unchecked or accuse them of deception and open the pouch, and players are encouraged to bribe the sheriff to make this decision a little easier for him. If the sheriff is wrong, then he pays the player gold. If he's correct, then the player pays him a fine. After several rounds of bluffing and double bluffing, players score their goods, and the highest score is the winner of the game. So Sheriff of Nottingham is not a social deduction game. Sheriff of Nottingham is a negotiation game, and it is heavy on the lying. The players are encouraged to outright, barefaced lie to their opponents, tell them things that are not true. However, it also uses bluffing as a sort of complement to the lying. So what might happen in this game is I might put cards into my pouch and tell the truth to the sheriff. This is 3 chickens, and it is 3 chickens. Then I might bluff by placing coins onto that pouch and saying to the sheriff, please don't open it. Please don't open it. I'll give you 5 coins. I'll give you 10 coins if you don't open it. And what I'm really doing there, I'm not lying, but I'm trying to lead the sheriff to think that I have lied and therefore open the pouch and I'll get a kickback in terms of the sort of reward for being wrongly accused. So that is bluffing, and it's used there nicely to complement the lying that goes in the game. Of course, a lot of games use bluffing, and auction was one of my sort of player interactions, and one of the key things in auctions is that idea that I might bid on something that I don't really want just to knock the price up a few notches and imply to the other players that I might want that thing. Essentially there I'm bluffing. I'm pretending that I want it. I'm not outright saying it, but I'm pretending that I'm willing to pay a lot of money for this thing, and I'm leading the other players to bid higher and higher. You see this frequently in the game Princes of Florence, where we're trying to gain different buildings to put into our various palazzo. I don't know if that's what the plural is for palazzo. Palazzi, let's say. So we're trying to put buildings into this to attract artisans who are going to score us victory points. But I might imply that I want a certain item. In fact, it's not true. This is very similar in motivation to what I talked about in my video as hate drafting or deliberate blocking, where I'm doing something that could actually harm myself, but I'm doing it specifically to stop somebody else from getting something. So I might even buy that item in that auction. I'm taking a risk. Somebody might call my bluff. I might end up buying the thing for quite a high price, but at least I've stopped someone else from having it, even if I don't need it myself. That's essentially hate drafting in another form, or at least the motivation for it is very similar. Other games that feature bluffing, you'll see it in lots of card games, trick-taking games, games where I'm playing cards and I'm holding cards back in my hand and we're trying to guess what has he got in his hand, and my various actions with my cards might imply that I have more than I have. We see it in poker massively, bluffing rather than lying. So my bids, my bets here, you know, that gambling aspect of it, how he's putting a lot of money in there, he must have something good in his hand. I'm not outright saying it, I'm not lying, but I'm bluffing. My actions are leading other people to think that I have something that I don't. You see it in games, board games. One that I picked off the shelf just to show you is the game Mr. Jack by Bruno Catala. In this game, it's an asymmetric game where one player is Jack the Ripper, and they are trying to escape from London, and the other characters are moving around and trying to land on the same space as Jack the Ripper. So one player is playing as Jack, the other player is controlling the characters trying to land on Jack's space. However, Jack is disguised as one of the other characters, so you don't know which playing piece is Jack the Ripper. Only the player who's playing as Jack knows that. So the other player has to deduce from his actions which one of these playing pieces is the right one to capture. And so you tend to see that players will, the player playing as Jack the Ripper, he'll move a different piece just to imply that this one might be Jack, and actually it's not. He doesn't outright say it, he doesn't lie, but he bluffs by moving the wrong piece towards the exit, and then the other one slips out the back when the detective player chases the wrong piece. So that's an example of bluffing in a board game. Another example is the game Stratego, where we have lines of pieces, all with different values on them, and the other player can't see what the pieces are. So I might move a particularly weak piece, but move it in a really confident way to imply that it's much stronger than it actually is, thereby drawing my opponent into a trap. It's not outright lying, but it's bluffing. And these are all forms of player interaction. So anyway, thank you for the question, Benji, and I hope you found this little addendum interesting. If you did, please watch some of my other videos or subscribe to my YouTube channel, Adam's Board Game Wales. I'm Adam78 on Board Game Geek, and on Twitter I'm @BoardGameWales. Thank you very much for watching. All the best.